Hey Squishies! Welcome back to another vlog. This is Star vs. the Forces of Evil, Season 2, Episode 16, I think. Baby and Running with Scissors. Both of these episodes kind of shared in common that well, no, I'll take that back. Both of these episodes share in common that they had surprising endings. But one of them was very predictable right up until that ending. The other, not so much. In part because we were dealing with more unknown factors. That said, let's start with Baby. Where there was really only one unknown factor, Baby. And the fact that she was treated with such dread despite being quite cute, and other than her appetite seemingly harmless, made it clear that she was going to actually be a much more difficult evaluator than she appeared. And that's where, it was kind of predictable. Star would hit the verge of failing, then in desperation, because we've seen that in moments of emotion, Star is able to pull off magic she can't normally. In a moment of desperation, she would achieve whatever it was she needed to achieve. In this case, the apple. And I loved the way she actually ended up doing it. I loved all the things up to that point, all her failures to transport the apple, but I think the best one was definitely the last one, because we have this huge emotional build-up, and then the gag of the apple just falls in half. And that releases the tension of the moment, that laughter. Only to immediately bring back a what is going on, I thought we resolved this kind of a feeling. Because the tension was released, but there's this feeling of needing to resolve it and returning as this as the apple seed starts to grow. Excuse me. The growth of the apple seed into a tree is really gorgeous. And I've always liked that kind of accelerated growth visual. It's something that Disney has played with for a long time. One of the all-time great nature films is Disney's The Living Desert, about Joshua Tree National Forest. Which is already a very beautiful place, but Disney went in and used specially slowed down cameras to make slow processes appear much faster. So you get to see flowers growing and blooming in, moments, far faster than real time. And it's a beautiful effect. And then Fantasia 2000, which is a severely underrated movie, its brilliant Rites of Spring segment. Rites of Spring was the old Fantasia. I'm talking about Firebird. The Firebird segment. The director of that segment said that he had this lifelong wish that after the eruption of Mount St. Helens, they'd been able to set up a camera that would take a frame a year, so they could animate the woods coming back in, seconds. See a tree grow from nothing like that. And so that's what he animated for that sequence, and it's gorgeous. And this kind of does the same thing, where it's it treats the tree as sort of a bundle of vines that grow up around each other, which I honestly don't know. I don't think that's really how a tree grows, but it looks really cool as those become the branches, and then the one branch hanging in front of baby as she's about to leave turns into the apple. And it's perfect. This is what provokes baby to go home and tell the king and queen of Muni that Star is undisciplined and so on and so forth, but that she is actually better at magic than her mother was at the same age. That her spellcasting is more advanced. And that's the surprise. And the even bigger one is that she reminds baby of Eclipsa, who's been referenced a couple times before as like the evil queen of Muni. One of Star's ancestors that was apparently quite dark. And we've seen hints in recent episodes of that dark side to Star. That there's more than just callousness there, that there's a real potential for black magic. For, jealousy, and magic powered by jealousy and that kind of thing. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays out, how that develops. And also if they maintain that as like a fixed distinction, or if, as I'm hoping, it turns out to be something that's a little more complicated than that. Not, good magic powered by good emotions and bad magic powered by bad emotions, but different kinds of magic that have different purposes and different dangers and, perhaps even different origins, but that there isn't necessarily this inherent judgment to it. And I keep coming back to one of my, all-time favorite anime series, and to Lena Inverse, who really does seem like the closest comparison for Star in terms of being like this kind of selfish teenager who's underneath it all got a good heart, but she's kind of lazy and greedy and self-centered, but when the chips are down, she'll, fight for what's right. And magically incredibly powerful. But specifically, Lena uses straight up black magic. She calls on demons, like, habitually. Her, go-to trick is to call on, they're called Mazaku in the series, which got translated as monsters, but a more literal translation is race of evil. Demon is a pretty close fit. She used one of her standard tricks is to use the power of, call upon the power of one demon to destroy another. And I mean, it's mostly a slapstick comedy series with some occasional dark moments, but it really feels like the comparison for Starverse, and that's part of why I hope that they kind of go down this route of, well, maybe she can use black magic for good purposes. We'll see. Especially since here, black magic is emotionally powered. And I'm just calling it black magic. It's dark magic, whatever you want to call it. Magic appears to be, at least for Star, emotionally powered. And the implication that there are good emotions and bad emotions, as opposed to good and bad ways to handle emotions, is actually kind of a deeply toxic thing. There are no bad emotions. Every emotion that a person feels is created by their thoughts and attitudes and opinions in a natural, organic way. And then they take action. They choose their actions based on the emotions they feel. But it's at those two ends that there's any kind of control, and therefore it does to end where there's any kind of morality. You can change how you think about things, you can change your attitude, you can change your behavior. You can't really change the emotions that link the two. So since you have no control over it, you don't really have any responsibility for it. There's no such thing as a bad emotion. You feel what you feel. Now, if that emotion arises from a bad attitude, then you've got a bad attitude and you need to change it, but that still doesn't make that emotion inherently bad. You know? Envy, rage, even hatred have their place if the thoughts and attitudes that give rise to them are correct and good, and the behaviors that you fuel with them are good. Then the emotion is good. Or rather, then the whole pathway is good, because again, the emotions can't be good or bad, because you have no control over them. Not directly anyway. You can change your thoughts and attitudes, like I said, but that's what you're controlling and have responsibility for. Anyway, the second half was mostly like this silly Marco-focused romp, and then went way dark at the end. Hekapoo, I hope, is recurring, because she was a lot of fun. And just the idea of the being who makes the dimensional scissors, being like this immensely powerful, basically a trickster, is definitely fun. And also the idea of like Marco having this years-long conflict with her, in which they ultimately kind of become friends, while remaining antagonistic, is just, it's a really cool and fun thing for a show to do. I like that concept wherever I've seen it. But then you get, that really dark turn at the end where Marco is a 14-year-old boy again. To go from 30 to 14, that would be horrifying. His body would feel wrong, assuming it doesn't already because of dysphoria, because I'm still holding on to this trans Marco thing. His body feels wrong. Little things like the way he's forgotten the password to his computer, and the way that line delivery goes, and the way the shot is framed and his expression, that hits hard. That is one tiny example of the ways in which he has disconnected from the life that he's now suddenly thrown back into. There's 2 Star Trek episodes I think of in relation to this kind of plot. Because the first one was one of my first encounters with It Was All a Dream done really well. And that's the Star Trek The Next Generation episode whose name I am suddenly blanking on. And that's obnoxious because it's like a famously good episode. Anyway, it's the one where this satellite beams an entire life into Picard's head, and over the course of the episode he lives this entire lifetime that turns out to be this dead civilization's way of telling others about themselves. And it's like this, and at the end of the episode he finds that he can still play the flute, which is something he learned to do during this other lifetime. Then you have a D69 episode that I'm also blanking on the name of, but it's one where O'Brien, as a punishment for a crime, lives out a decades-long sentence in moments. And comes out deeply psychologically scarred, to the point that by the end of the episode, he attempts suicide, which not something Star Trek typically depicts. But it ends with him being put on medication and going into therapy, which, is exactly what he needs. It's kind of what Marco probably needs too, at minimum the therapy part. Now, why did I reference it was all just a dream stuff? Because that's what this is. Physically, there are essentially no consequences of this event. All the consequences are in Marco's mind, the memories he's gained. So in the course of 5 minutes, he got 16 years worth of memories. It doesn't actually matter whether that was some kind of a simulation or dream or something that actually happened, because it has no physical consequences. Any changes that occurred physically are reverted, except the bald spot, which I'm assuming is going to reset, by next episode. What I'm concerned about is that Marco's psychological response will be reset by next episode, or that it won't. Both of those are problematical to me. One in the more Tumblr-y sense of let's psychologically scar this character and then act like nothing happened, because hey, psychological wounds are easy to get over, right? But then if they do keep it, that feels like a sharp veering away, which this whole episode does, from Marco being trans, because he seems pretty happy with his adult male body in this episode. Now, that's not to say, somebody can look like that and still be trans, but it's, and you can even not have dysphoria and still be trans, but certainly there were things depicted in the show in the past where he seemed to be indicated to have dysphoria, or at least hinted at. Things that were readable that way. So, I don't know. At the same time, given a choice right now between being, having to go off hormones and revert to the body I had a year ago, or even the body I had 7 years ago when I was 30, or be a 14-year-old boy again. Those are both horrifying prospects. And I honestly don't know how to choose between them. So it's believable that he prefers being, the ripped, battle-scarred, masculine figure he was, to being a 14-year-old boy. Regardless, it was a pretty good couple episodes. The second half kind of threw me a little bit off because it just feels really dark for this show. And even if like, even if they go back on it, that feels like a cop-out. If they don't undo it, that feels still way too dark. If they never reference it again, then it's like, is this, it colors everything that I read going forward, and I don't think it's likely that they'll pull what Young Justice did with It Was All a Dream episode, where the entire next episode was spent on the characters working through the emotional trauma of the dream in the previous episode. But I guess we'll see. But yeah, I think that's about it. Thank y'all for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Check out my Patreon for early access to vlogs, Let's Plays, essays, and more. And I'll see y'all next time. Bye!